Welcome to the Influencer Show with your host, Trishawn Ben Salmi.
Hello everyone, it's Trishawn Ben Salmi, aka I'm the Kid, and today I wanted to interview the very inspirational, the amazing Douglas Vermeeren, who is not only a movie director but a public speaker and a host of amazing things. So Doug, why don't you introduce yourself to listeners and tell them a bit about you?
Sure, thank you. Well, first of all, I'm honored to be on the show. I love you guys, and your family is so awesome. So thanks for having me. This is, for me, a privilege. Now, how did I get started? I started kind of as a young person at about 19. I started interviewing some of the world's top achievers, very much what Napoleon Hill did to write the book Think and Grow Rich. And he actually interviewed people like Thomas Edison and Henry Ford and all these really interesting people. I got to people like Oprah Winfrey, Richard Branson, Donald Trump, Mark Cuban, you name it, just tons of really neat people who are super well known. And the stuff that I learned from them really kind of changed my life and helped me understand that I could create success beyond anything that I'd ever experienced before. And I didn't at first believe that about me. So it was a good transition to have those influences in my life. And that's a little bit about me. And then we produce movies for personal development, and I speak around the world and try and help people where I can.
Oh, that's absolutely amazing. So we have an amazing guy with us here today. So I'd like to ask, what was the biggest takeaway from making the movie?
That's always such a great question, because I learned so much, not only while making the movie, but even as we release it, right? But my favorite part is always when I get to interview some of the thought leaders in the film. And as you can imagine, some of these people are amazing, like Bob Proctor and Joe Vitale and John Ostroff and my buddy John DeMartini and others. And what I find is kind of interesting is what you see in the movie is just such a small fraction of what we talk about when we do the interviews. And in fact, with Bob Proctor alone, I think we spent the better part of a day speaking. Yet in the movie, I think in grand total, you've got him for less than 10 minutes, right? So for me, that's one of the big things that I learn and that I love when I'm doing it, is just to really associate with people who are thinking at a high level. You've heard it said that, your network equals your net worth. And that's definitely true, right? But I think even more than that, it's not just your network, it's the people within your network that you spend a lot of time with, the ones that you actually build the relationship with, right? Because you really become very much like the people you spend the most time with, because you gain insights through their thinking, they gain insights through yours, and together you both elevate. And what I find by literally finding a better network is you just have everything in your life rises. The opportunities and the thinking and the relationships and the possibilities, you just really start gravitating towards bigger things. So I suppose that's one challenge I'm going to give your audience right off the bat, is look in your life at who really brings out the best in you, who inspires you, who makes you feel good when you're around them, right? Who makes you feel like you're getting to your goals and accomplishing your mission. And I'm going to just say, start spending more time with those kinds of people. I'm not saying eliminate the other people in your life, but I'm going to say spend more time with those that are bringing out your best. You owe it to yourself.
Yeah, that is definitely so very true. I think that is absolutely amazing, because like when people often talk about like friends and things like that, they aren't, I'm not saying that people have to be selective, but they should just be simply like aware of who they surround themselves with, because like you said, your network does equal your net worth, but it's also about being with people who are then at maybe the one level above you, so that then you're able to grow a little, and then you can just keep on like bouncing off each other, really.
Yeah, I think that's true. And in the movie, we talk about the power of influence. Everything around us is an influence. The TV shows we watch, the music we listen to, the video games, the websites we visit, everything influences us. In fact, it's almost as though, I love what Marie Diamond said in the movie, we surround ourselves with a three-dimensional vision board, right? And the things that we bring into our life by choice are the things that we actually say, this is what I want, right? This is who I want to become. And we don't often realize the consequences of bringing certain things into our life. And one thing that you said that was really kind of interesting is to find someone a level above us. And I think that that's good, but I also want to just maybe point out that sometimes we look at ourselves and we don't really think that we're ready for somebody at a high level, so we play small. So I'm going to suggest, don't just get somebody a level above you. Look for people that really, really inspire you. And I can promise you right now, because again, as a 19-year-old, when I started doing this myself, I didn't really think I was that important. I didn't really think I was that sophisticated. And to be honest with you, I didn't think I was that cool. But the truth is, you know, we often downplay ourselves and minimize ourselves, and that keeps us from playing really big. So I'm going to say, play big, go for things that are so big, as Joe says in the movie, that they're so big people will think you're crazy, right? And you would be surprised what you get. There's a saying that says, if you shoot for the moon, you'll live among the stars, right? But if we just shoot for kind of average or okay, well, that's probably what we're going to wind up with. So just know that you're worth it. Shoot for big things. Always aim for big things.
Definitely, I totally agree with that. And I hope that you listeners are taking notes so that you guys do not miss out on this golden advice. Why did you create the movie?
Oh, that's a great question. Any of the movies that I've created, and as you know, this is our fourth one, have really started with really two thoughts in mind. One, what questions do I want to answer? Right? Like, I want to understand this better. And then secondly, what movie would I like to see? Because if I don't feel like I'd be interested, I kind of think other people probably won't either. So it's got to be something that really excites me. And so how did How Thoughts Become Things come about? Well, it's interesting. I've always felt like when I started doing my interviews with the top achievers, that there was something in the way that these top achievers thought that was different than anybody else, right? Like, average people don't think like top achievers. So I knew there was a difference. And as I started to shift my thinking and level up my thinking, I noticed my results in my life begin to change. And then it all kind of hit home when I saw the movie The Secret. Now, we've got many of the people from The Secret in this film. And in our films previous, I've got many of the people from The Secret. So they're all close friends of mine. But the one thing that was interesting is when The Secret came out, there was a speaker in it who said, thoughts become things. And my question was, okay, so how? What does that really even mean, right? Like, how does that happen? Mm-hmm. And so I started over the years, just kind of since then, investigating and thinking carefully about this how part. And I showed this in a recent interview with someone else, but I'll do it here too. In the movie, we've got the words how thoughts become things. And hopefully you can see that, right? And most of the time, people draw a line down the middle and they say, I'm going to focus a lot on the thoughts and the things. They always say, I need to control my thinking. I always think negative. I need to overcome fear and doubt and discouragement and despair. So they put a lot of focus on thoughts. And then things, people are like, oh, I want to get that nice car. I want the house. I want the clothing. I want the perfect relationship. I want this, that, and the other. So they're very focused on things. But the interesting thing is that this side is not the most important. In fact, we're human, so your thoughts are going to come regardless of whether you prepare or plan for them or not. They will arrive. And the other thing about things is that most of the things that you already want exist in some form or another. So in other words, that Ferrari that you want, it exists. There's one. I own one, right? There's nice houses. There's good relationships. All these things are available. So these things really, they're out there, but we can't really do a lot about them because they exist on their own. But these two are really important. And the how is now, okay, so if we all have thoughts, how do we know which ones are going to be productive? How can we overcome the ones that are hurting us? How can we overcome fear? How can we empower our thinking? Those are all how questions, right? But the other one associates with this quite regularly or quite easily. This idea of become has to do with the changes that we need to make to have these things actually come to us. And I love kind of like what Jim Rohn said one time. Jim said that if you win the lottery, you've got to become a millionaire very fast in order to keep it, right? Because most people don't have the habits, right? Most people are focused on, again, what they have. That's or how to have, right? Like the things. And then sometimes when you go to seminars and training, there's a lot of talk about what you've got to do to get to these things, right? But very seldom do people ever really think about what you've got to be, right, before you can do so that you can have. When we kind of thing, we really understand the fundamentals of change and who we need to become, and to be quite frankly, how easy it is if we're using the right formulas, then that's when things really become easy for us to be able to have. That's the difference.
That is so very true. I think that's one thing that people often overlook, because when they talk about successful people and things like that, they often think, oh, they don't have negative thoughts and things like that. But that's not the case. They just know how to then they know how to not only to identify them, but also channel them into different ways that they can then use to simply power them forward to achieve their goals and desires and make their days even more productive than usual.
That's right. In fact, it's interesting. There's a couple speakers in our film that point out something really quite cool. And in fact, I'm specifically remembering Bob Doyle and Joe Vitale talking a lot about this. Many people feel like the objective here is to never have a negative thought. Let's think positive all the time, and positive things will flow, and let's just make everything good. The truth is you're human, and you also live in a world with other humans, and also in a world where there's unpredictability. So just the fact that there's other humans and unpredictability means you're going to have a negative thought sometime. You're human yourself. You can't avoid that. But the question now is how do you respond, right? How do you work with those negative thoughts, right? And as I went and I interviewed the world's top achievers, it's so funny. Actually, here's something interesting. Just an hour ago, I was chatting with one of my mentors. He's worth about $800 million, right? A lot of money, and he owns real estate around the world, and he has many businesses and things. His name's Brian. And do you know what he was telling me during the COVID virus? He's losing right now $1 million a month. Yeah, how does that feel? Right? $1 million a month right now is what he's losing because people aren't able to pay rents or other things or things that are going on. Now, obviously, it's funny because he's worth quite a bit of money, so it didn't really bother him. And he laughed as he told me, he goes, it's crazy, I'm losing $1 million a month. But you could just hear in his voice that he had chosen the how to deal with this a little differently. Now, I'm sure, anybody in the world would be happy, to find a solution so they're, not losing that kind of money a month. And many people are losing a lot less than that, and it's bothering them. So my question is, how do you deal with things when it hits the fan? And it was very interesting to watch his approach. He was talking to me about more than $1 million, because when something's really on someone's mind, they talk about it a lot, right?
Yeah.
So he mentioned it, and then he told me how today he's so excited to go golfing, and he wants to go fishing, and he just bought a brand new boat that they're going to go fishing on. And then he's talking about his grandkids to me and stuff. And so in other words, after he told me, that he lost $1 million a month, he kind of went on to other things, right? Like that's not where the real value in my life is. It's true. The COVID virus has affected me. I'm losing $1 million a month, but hey, I'm going to go golfing today. I'm going to go fishing here soon. I just bought a boat, went out with my grandkids the other day. And then he says, you got to come over and go on the boat and all this kind of stuff. And so I'm going to go over there too, as soon as the situation clears up a little bit better. But our words always talk a lot about, like, they reveal how we solve problems. And so I think it's really important that we're very careful about how we think and what we talk about as well.
Definitely, and that is so very true, because thoughts do become things. So and another thing that's really important is when people often try to bring things into reality, they often try things that they don't want. They tend to focus more on that, but actually the things that you resist will only persist. So by focusing all the energy saying, oh, I don't want this, your brain actually deletes all the stuff. It just hears that main key word. For example, there's this one, I remember a friend of mine, but they were talking about how, let's say that they had a grandson, and they said, what do you want for your birthday? And the grandson said, buy me anything except for a pen. And then when that granddad then went into the shop, he's thinking, what does my grandson want? And the one thing that actually stuck with him was the pen. So it's about focusing your energy and attention on things that you actually want instead of the things that you do not want.
That is funny. It's kind of funny. It reminds me of a story very similar to, you'd say, I don't want this, I don't want this, I don't want this, I don't want this. And it's kind of like the universe has got a little bit of a forgetful memory in terms of, did he say I wanted that or I didn't want that? Did he want that or didn't? I can't remember. It was something about that. Get it, right? Just so I don't miss it. Get it, right? So it's very similar to this idea with the pen. We've got to be very, very careful about what we want. And I think one of the things that's also interesting about that is I love what Stephen Covey once said. Remember 7 Habits of Highly Effective People?
Yeah.
He said, many people climb the ladder of success only to find that it's leaning against the wrong wall.
Yeah.
So in other words, they often even say for success, I want this, I want this, I want this, but they haven't really thought it through. And they don't understand what it's really going to look like or feel like once it arrives. And it kind of reminds me of that idea that people often say happiness is a choice. But it's not really, if you think about it. Happiness is not only making the choice, but it's also being very at peace and excited about the results, the consequences that will follow. And so I think with any of this, when we're looking at how thoughts become things, make sure that the things that you want are actually going to be the things that you really do want long term, not just for now, but long term. In fact, I was just chatting with someone the other day who, for the very first time, they got themselves a very nice luxury car as well. And in their case, it was a McLaren. And so, he'd never owned a really expensive car like this before. And so this was a dream come true for him. Well, he was very, very happy with it for about the first 6 months. And then he had to go in and have some belts changed and, fluids changed and oil changed and all of these kinds of things. And the bill came out to be enormous. Well, then he decided he didn't like the car so much because he never thought that there's a fee that goes to maintain this thing. Like once you have it, that's not the end. That's actually just the beginning because there's always a fee to maintain it. And then the interesting thing is I'm from Canada, so you can't drive cars like that all year round. So now you need to store it. And then, you got to wait till next summer. In fact,
Yeah.
This is kind of silly, but, the one thing I warned him before, I said, that last summer with my Ferrari, because I've got grandkids and tell you the truth, I drive a Dodge Caravan minivan most of the time. That's most of the time. But last year I only drove the Ferrari, I think probably maybe 6 times. So if you're going to spend several $100,000 on a vehicle like that, be prepared that you're only going to drive it 6 times. And you're also going to still have to cover the maintenance. So don't be disappointed when reality sets in and shows you that maybe the things that you chose weren't attached to the consequences or what's the reality. So always be aware of what the reality is before you end up really committing to big decisions in your life.
That is so very true. And I hope that you listeners have been able to utilize this information that Doug is sharing us today so that you guys can then get closer to achieving your goals in life. And I understand that this isn't your first movie, as you said. So if you had the chance to go back in time and change something from all those movies that you've created, what would it be and why?
Well, it's always fun to go back and see my older movies because some of the technology that's available to us now is not available to us then.
Yeah.
And for example, when we did our first movie, the Opus, in 2008, you probably never even have heard of this. Like right now we're shooting digitally and we've got all these high-tech cameras. Well, back then we had something called Betacam SP, which is a big tape that they used to shoot the television programs and the news and stuff on. We're talking ancient, right? Like this is really ancient stuff. And so, obviously, if I were to go back, it would be delightful to reshoot some of those scenes with the real vision. Now I understand a little bit why George Lucas did that with Star Wars, to go back and fix things, because there were some technical things that I would have loved to do that I couldn't do back then. But in all seriousness, aside from that, I think that my understanding of success and the blessings and benefits that come from learning from these people, I think that there's some that I would have asked deeper questions. So for example, one that I really regret and wish I would have forever is, and you know me, you've heard me talk about Frank Maguire before. Frank was one of my mentors, and he was one of the co-founders of Federal Express, the former VP of marketing of all of KFC. He was the VP of marketing for American Airlines. He was in the White House under Lyndon B. Johnson and John F. Kennedy. And he was also the personal philosophy teacher for Marilyn Monroe. Like, he knew everybody, right? And I really wish if I could go back, there were more questions I would love to ask him, more things that I would love to chat with him about. And they may not even make it in my movies. In fact, on my YouTube channel, I'm going to put up an interview with Frank that I did once a handful of years ago that will share some of his wisdom. But I think that's the thing that I notice is a lot of these successful people that you get a chance to meet, man, you'll always look back, especially after they pass away, and say, I wish I would have spent more time learning from them, right? They say that your network is your net worth. We've heard that. But really probably the biggest part of that most people don't think about is your network is actually your safety net. And if you can learn to solve problems at a higher level with their support, you get their insights, you get their mentorship, you get their experience. I think it's one of the most valuable things. And so what's my biggest regret? Man, not asking somebody like Frank far more questions. Another one that was in the Opus was Bill Bartman. Bill Bartman started out on welfare, and with his wife, they borrowed a little bit of money, and they started a company, and he became the 25th wealthiest man in the United States. Like from welfare to the 25th wealthiest man. And Bill was an amazing guy, and I don't feel like I asked him enough questions, right? And even though we were friends for a number of years, I miss being able to chat with him. In fact, I'll remember one time we were sitting down and having a cheeseburger and talking about how he built these multi-million-dollar companies. This is like fascinating, right?
Yeah.
So that's one of the things that I miss is that people are gone too soon. And I'm really grateful for the opportunities that I've had to talk to these people and learn from them and to be friends with them. But maybe I'm greedy, but I want more time. I want more time with those guys. That's my feelings. I don't know. And you've been to events where I brought some of these people, like when we had John DeMartini there. I'm the first guy taking notes too, right? Like you got to really value the information that can come from some people who have done amazing things and seek out those amazing people wherever they are in your life. And I'm going to suggest actually it's not just a matter of their financial success. I'm going to say you should seek out even people like your own grandparents. They're not going to be here forever. And the wisdom that they've got and the things that they can share with you and the things that they can teach you. I think there's a saying that says this, and to me it's really neat. It says that old eyes see best. And what that means is the experience that they have with their eyes, they see things that many others don't. So, if you're listening today, I'm going to suggest you don't even have to go as far as finding, a wealthy business owner who started a multinational company. I mean, they've got wisdom, but start even close to home by interviewing those in your own family and recording it, right? Like take it down so that even your own kids and their kids can kind of understand and you write down what's happening now. What might be interesting is one of these days, maybe even your kids or your grandkids will encounter a situation like the virus and they'll have to understand what to do. Well, they can then look back in your journals and through your experience and maybe you'll help them. Maybe you'll help them more than you even realize.
That's so very true. Thank you so much for sharing. That's great word of advice. Yeah. What would you say was the biggest obstacle that you had whilst making this movie?
What's funny is there's obstacles every day. Every day. Even today I already hit 3. But the thing with an obstacle, and maybe this is kind of what I can do a throwback to something I said in the movie The Opus. I said there's no such thing as problems. Everything is a puzzle and there are solutions for puzzles. And so, every day there's new things. I've got, speakers that have needs because we've got so many speakers in the team. So, just think of a family, right? Every once in a while there's a member of the family that's got a challenge. And then tomorrow it's another member of the family that's got a challenge. And then another member of the family. Well, here I've got 11 speakers that I'm dealing with. And so every one of them has different needs or things that they want or shows that they've got to be on or material that they've got to be given, or they've got somebody they want to promote the movie to. So I've got to go cut a special trailer for them, right? So that's the movie family. Now we've also got the team that put together the movie. So you've got people here that are trying to do the creative part. Maybe they don't like it and you've got to talk to them and you've got to be sensitive in a way to help them understand what you're talking about. And discussing creative things is a very hard thing to do. In fact, one of the things that I did, even in the Opus, for example, is I gave people a piece of music and said, I need it to feel like this. Like you can't even use words to say, this is what I'm, because music is a better teacher sometimes than our words. And then I also have, as you can imagine, people who are running the affiliate programs and people who are running the social media and people who are running the, the regular media with podcasts and radio and TV interviews and all these kinds of things. And then there's also my family on top of all of this circus that's going on. How do I, again, help them to feel that I'm still involved in the family, right? So I think what's the biggest obstacle? I think the biggest obstacle is maybe sorting out priority, what needs to be done first, and finding balance, what needs to be done so that, that the balance is there and that things keep moving forward. Here's the deal with any of these problem solvings. Don't seek for perfection, right? Don't seek for perfection, because you'll never get it. There'll always be something more that you can do tomorrow. There's always going to be something you can do better tomorrow. Seek to get it done as best as you can in the moment. Give it your best everywhere you go. And then, try and live with what happens, right? And that's really all we can do, right? Like, there's no such thing as perfection. So don't hesitate and wait for it, because it's never going to arrive.
That's so very true. I think those two key points are just really important, because when people often try to seek perfection, they often stop themselves from achieving. And one thing that, like, just as a family that we believe in is get it done, then get it right. So if you guys, listeners, have something that you would like to just achieve, make sure that you can get it done as soon as possible, and then try to improve it every other day. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I think that's really strong wisdom. In fact, as I observed the top achievers, and I've been, friends with many of them for years and years and years, they really, again, are focused on execution. And in fact, many of them, once they release something, it's always in the constant state of evolution and improvement is a good word. So yeah, don't seek for perfection. You'll never arrive at that. In fact, one of my other friends, I think you met Alex when he came to London one time with me. But Alex actually has a motto. He said 70% done is good enough to release it. It's good enough to take it to the public if it's 70% in how you want it to be. Now, I'm not sure if that's always the case. You'd have to use your own judgment. I try to make it as best I can. Like, if I released a movie that was 70% done, that wouldn't work. But I think there's some things in life that you could do that 70% is enough to get the ball rolling, to see if people are interested to support you, to get, other people to support you, and just, start testing things. So I think, don't wait for perfection, but you definitely need to be hustling. You got to be out there doing it. Yeah, I totally agree with that. When did you come up with the idea to make the movie, and why is the movie needed now more than ever?
What's really interesting is, if you want to do a little funny research, and now I'm encouraging a little behind the scenes, if you go to YouTube and you do some searching for how thoughts become things, you'll see that the first trailer that I put out of it, I think, was in 2010. So I've been working on this movie for about 10 years, right? And that first trailer, or a couple of trailers, there's 2 testings that I put out. I was actually testing the market to see if people were interested in this idea at all. I've always been fascinated by it. But here's the thing too, is I had a lot of pieces and elements ready to go for this movie. And the distributors I was working with said, nope, stop that one. We want you to do this one. You gave us this idea and we want this one first. So they took this one, the other one first. So I kind of had to shelve this one. So this one's been kind of a passion of mine for a long time. The other movie that replaced this, by the way, way back in 2010, came out in 2013. It's called The Gratitude Experiment. Right?
That one.
And then I wanted to come back to this one and do this one. But again, they said, no, we want the treasure map next. So even though my passion and desire was to get this film out, the powers that be dictated what they were willing to support me with. And so we had to put those ones out. And don't get me wrong, I love those movies. I had such a fun time making them, and the messages are very powerful and important in those. But this has always been one in the back of my mind. I've been always interested in the workings of the mind. I've been interested in neuroscience and neuroplasticity and how the brain changes itself and things so this has always been fascinating. But here's the other thing too. People sometimes say to me, Doug, what's your favorite movie? Like, I've made, what's my favorite movie? And my answer is always the next one. Because I've also got an idea now for what's going to follow this. This is a fantastic movie and I loved it. But I've got an idea for something coming up that I think is going to be really interesting to people. Can't tell you what it is though. It's a secret.
That's amazing. You guys keep your eyes open for what Doug has coming. It's going to be amazing. Yeah. Because one quote that Doug, so when I attended Douglas events, one thing that he'd always say is, make your goals and aspirations in life specific and clear so they are attainable and near. And that's one thing that's really stuck with me, because like just throughout my life as a whole, whenever I tend to, let's say that I'm trying to create an online course, first of all, it has to be specific. So the name of the course, things like that, then the date and things like that. So that quote alone had just done wonders for me. So thank you so much, Doug.
Anytime. Well, here's the deal: is I don't know that there could be always just one movie, and the reason why I think a couple of reasons why is that we as people are always changing, right? We're always changing, and this is why also even with how thoughts become things, I've already had people who've emailed me. In fact, the record, funny enough, this one fellow emailed me and says I've actually seen the movie a total of 8 times already. 8 times, right? And so, you know, it's just like kind of when The Secret happened, there were people who were watching it all the time to make changes. And this fella, going back to, you know, him saying he's watched it 8 times, he actually talked in this email with me about how he learned something different every single time, which to me is neat, right? And I imagine that, you know, it's funny because I even sometimes go back and I watch my own movies. Like I've watched the Opus again, I've watched the Gratitude Experiment, and sometimes you just forget what was said, but also you become a new person. So what was said now has different meaning than ever before, right? And so I think it's important to revisit these. So I don't know if it's something that I could ever like put out one movie and said, that's it. This is the movie that makes the biggest difference for everybody, right? I think it's something that just the way that we learn as people, we need to reconnect. And the other thing that I think is maybe important, and this is with The Secret or with the Opus or any of them, it's really the beginning of a conversation. And same with this movie too. And so when we watch the movie, my idea of how to use it best is actually to come and join us at a live event in person too. So we can talk about the movie, we can dialogue about it, we can really look at your life individually and help you implement strategies that will give you those benefits and stuff. And I think that the real power is that not in the movie, but in the community that follows, right? So how can we together help each other evolve? And I think that that's really the mission, right? It's the community part of it.
Definitely. And when, I'd like to ask, when did you first realize that you wanted to create movies?
Wow. That is a really neat question. I would have to say, and I know this is going to sound crazy, most people who are big time filmmakers like J.J. Abrams and all these guys, they have the same answer as me. And it was probably the first time that I saw Star Wars, the original Star Wars. When I was a kid, I was in grade 1, and my father took me and my brothers and my mom to the drive-in movie theater. You probably don't even know what a drive-in is. And we all went in the car and we saw Star Wars. In fact, I still remember as a young boy, my vivid memories of exactly the scene where my dad took me out of the car and we went and quickly ran to the bathroom and got popcorn and stuff. That was the trash compactor scene in Star Wars, right? So I still vividly remember all that. And then, of course, all the kids talked about that and it got exciting. And then a few years later, you know, it was The Empire Strikes Back and Raiders of the Lost Ark. And so I was raised in the midst of these big blockbuster movies that were larger than life, that were just grand, right? And so when I was in about the 2nd grade, my mother got me registered with an agency where I could go and be on movie sets. And so I started as an extra. I think my very first opportunities, I was riding a bicycle in the background on a show called Mildred McFall. And I've never seen it, so don't ask me what it's like. And I just loved movies from there. And in my school, I tried to, when I got into junior high and stuff, I started to skip school so I could go be on movie sets. If there was a movie in my city, I would skip school and we'd go be on the movie set. And in high school, I was involved in the audio visual clubs and things of that nature. And so I always was interested in movies. Now, the interesting thing is I also did stunt work in movies. In fact, the last big movie that I did photo doubling and some small stunt work was Open Range with Kevin Costner and Robert Duvall and Annette Bening and Diego Luna, who's in the new Star Wars Rogue One, right? And so I've always loved that. But the problem for me, I'm not good looking enough and I'm not tall enough to ever be a leading man in Hollywood, right? And I'm probably not talented enough either. So rather than me try to pursue movies to accept me and bring me into the movies, I rewrote the rules. So I said, instead of me, telling them, please pick me, I said, forget that. I'm going to make my own movies. And then I have control over them. And now I have big name speakers that come to me and say, pick me. They come to me, right? And so I've changed the rules. Now, one of these days, who knows, maybe I will do some mainstream Hollywood movies. I've got some scripts that I've written, but I haven't done anything with yet. I'm having a lot of fun with these kind of movies right now because I believe that, there are a lot of Hollywood style movies out there, but there's not as many documentaries or feeling films that make people inspired about themselves, right? Films that help them tap into their best self. And so I'm finding, I think, maybe a greater sense of fulfillment than a movie where I'm like, pew, 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 right? Like, I mean, there's enough of those kind of movies out there, and those are wonderful movies. I enjoy watching them myself, but I want to do something that I think maybe has a stronger difference for people, right? Once they've seen it, they want to change something.
Yeah, that's absolutely amazing how even from your, as you said, how when you first saw a movie, then you were then able to think of like, one day that will be me. That's absolutely amazing.
Well, what's funny is I don't know if you've seen this yet. This was actually on YouTube yesterday. I just put this up. As you know, May the 4th is Star Wars Day.
Yeah.
But one of my success interviews was actually, if you can see that, that's Anthony Daniels, who is C-3PO in Star Wars. You can find that on YouTube right now. One of my success interviews was with Anthony. So I had a chance to actually connect with people who were in the film that got me started and talk about their experiences being in hit movies like that. And, among the top 400 that I interviewed, there were other movie stars too that, I looked up to as a kid, and they were people larger than life for me. And now, like, some of them are my friends, which is really kind of cool.
That is absolutely amazing.
Yeah. Check out that interview. You'll like it. Speaking of Star Wars, it's interesting. He talks a lot about how he was selected to be C-3PO and some of the challenges that they had. And for a while, he wasn't very happy with George Lucas because of a few things that happened on Star Wars. He wasn't going to come back. And so he tells that story too, which is really kind of interesting. And I think it's just fascinating to kind of hear the real sort of behind the scenes on some of these things, right?
Definitely. I'll be sure to check that out, and I really do urge you listeners to check that out as well. And lastly, where can people find you if they'd like to watch your movie and also find out about any upcoming things you may have?
Yeah, well, we've got tons of free resources all over the internet. So I encourage you to start by trying some of the free things to see if you like me, you like the style that we teach, and if I can be useful and helpful to you. We mentioned my YouTube channel, which simply is my name, Douglas Vermeeren. You'll find me. There's scads of content there of great stuff that, like I said, you'll see some of the top achievers I interviewed. You'll learn from them. I also have an Instagram account where we post pretty regularly daily. Douglas Vermeeren, again, on Instagram, also on Facebook. And then you can find me on my website, douglasvermeeren.com. But certainly, I'm sure you've got a link that you're sharing to come and see the film. And that's a great opportunity as well. The film is I think, a really good starting point. But there's also really a lot of other great speakers in that film that they will edify you. And there are people that I've handpicked that I believe are able to provide really solid information and solid tools for you to really think at a high level and start manifesting the things that you dream about, that you want most, and the things that you're really working hard to achieve. Let's make it easier for you so you can have that all right now.
That is absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for sharing, and thank you for allowing me to interview you. I really have enjoyed it.
Anytime.
Thank you. Have a great day. Bye.
You too.